Hi, Titanic Tim here. I'm so glad you came. Come on in.
There's a man out by the sea, and there's no one like him. He's no more than you and me. As Titanic Tim, with a heart full of history and a mind full of dreams, he's collecting all the relics from the ship of steam. He's Titanic Tim, with a passion so grand. He gathered all his treasures from a very distant land.
Well, in the second grade, there was this book written by Dr. Robert Ballard, who discovered the ship in 1985. And this book had a page specific to the children that were on board Titanic. And as I looked at the photo of the young child and the baby that was maybe 6 months, toddler was maybe a year and a half old, it drew me into that story even more. I connected to the ship not on a level of a disaster, but a personal level. The people drew me in. As I learned that those children died, I had learned as a young child myself empathy and what that is towards a story such as Titanic. And from that point on, I was hooked. I wanted to know everything about the ship, the people, the history, and the future of the Titanic. Well, luckily for me, in the late 90s, there was a thing called eBay that came out. And fortunately, for me, they didn't require an age verification process. And I was able to create my own account on eBay without any adult supervision and started to purchase my first items. And back then, PayPal wasn't a thing. So I would actually walk to a local 7-Eleven with my $10, $15, $20, whatever it was that I was buying. I would send the seller the actual payment through a money order purchased at 7-Eleven. This is way before PayPal, so it was quite the process collecting these things. But as you can imagine, when I received it in the mail, it was just as exciting as receiving Amazon each day. One of the first few pieces of Titanic that I collected off of eBay was a piece of coal. This piece of coal was probably the first thing in the 90s, 1994 to be exact, to be recovered and to be distributed amongst Titanic exhibits so that individuals that went through the exhibit would have a piece of Titanic. This is the only thing allowed. Everything else that's recovered is, of course, on display within the exhibits themselves. But if you're fortunate enough, like I was, to collect a piece of coal from the earlier dives to Titanic in which those pieces of coal were recovered, I have proudly displayed this piece of coal, this little rock, this little piece of history in my collection from the earliest days of collecting Titanic, and I still take very good care of that piece of coal. I think the piece of coal really is the most prized possession. In 1999, I was fortunate enough to be featured in a local newspaper, the Tacoma News Tribune's young adult page, in which I had an article about my collection, and within that article, the photographer took a photo of me holding this piece of coal. And I think till this day, that piece of coal has such volume of voices, not necessarily voices, real voices, but if you look at it, you could just imagine all of the voices, all of the people that were tied to that particular night when that ship broke in half and those pieces of coal fell to the bottom of the ocean. I tie all of that to that night, and to me, this piece means the world to me. Well, just recently I purchased a really unique piece of Titanic history. A Titanic historian had been a part of the earlier days of recovery from the big piece. Now, the big piece is a piece of hull of Titanic that was located and attempted to be recovered. Unfortunately, when they attempted to recover it the first time, it fell back to the ocean floor. They came back years later, then eventually recovered it. It went through a restoration process which required a lot of hands-on activity from local experts. And then it went on exhibit. And so fortunately for me, I was able to find a gentleman that had a jacket on during his entire restoration process or handling of the big piece, and its entire jacket sleeve is covered in rust stains that he couldn't remove. So I have recently added this to the collection, and because he was actually the one that had handled the big piece and he understands the staining is from the Titanic, well, not necessarily the Titanic, but the big piece itself, when it was recovered, it began to rust. Well, he can vouch for that story. And so I had him write and sign a letter identifying the jacket and its history and his handling of the big piece. And for me, this covers the history and future possibility that I might sell it will come with the history of the piece. So each item that I get, I tend to ask for history, if there is available history. How did you get the item? And most of the items in my collection do have certificates of authenticity. So fortunately for me, it's been not that stressful to authenticate. Well, eBay being a primary source of my identifying the pieces that I want to collect, I search or have search items on my eBay list which will identify certain things that I'm looking for. And when I find these items, of course, I try to either buy now if an available option is there, or for some of the items that I'm trying to purchase, if they're requiring that I bid on that item, then I hope, of course, that I actually win the bid. There's been several times where I've been challenged by other bidders. Other Titanic collectors out there, I'm sure, are eager to get some of the pieces that I'm after as well. So the biggest challenge there is just being able to find something that you like and you're looking for, and then the rush that comes with trying to bid against someone else and hoping you get that. That, I believe, is the most challenging part of the collecting. In the late 90s, the Titanic Artifact exhibit had a gift shop. The gift shop would sell individuals replicas of jewelry, actual necklaces that mirrored an actual artifact recovered from the Titanic. Now, a lot of the artifacts recovered are decaying or damaged, so these necklaces or jewelry would be as they would appear back in the day of Titanic. And the gift shops had maybe 10 pieces. I've been able to find a majority of those. A lot of the times where I've thought that I've had almost the entire collection, Titanic Artifact collection of 1998, I then find out that I'm missing another piece, and then I've been able to add those through my searches on eBay. The most desired piece for me right now are a pair of cufflinks, black and gold cufflinks with a diamond in the center. It's costume jewelry, but it's the one piece from that particular collection, the Titanic Artifact collection, that I don't have currently in my possession. And I did at one point long ago, and I misplaced them, so it's a very frustrating thing not to have it, but I've been looking and looking and looking, and for years unable to come across them. So if they're out there, if you have them, let me know. A lot of my pieces, such as my postcards, I have over the last year been able to find 20 of the 100 postcards that were recovered from an individual's suitcase. Now, the tanning process of these suitcases had preserved the items within the leather bags themselves. So these artifacts, such as postcards and other literature, had been well preserved and recovered and restored and exhibited across the country. Countries, that is. I believe there's some exhibits in Ireland and the US. But as individuals tour these exhibits, they post photos online. I then see what they find, and a lot of the times I'm coming across a lot of new postcards, and then I try to find those on eBay. Now, I receive these antique postcards that are over 100 years old. They have an authentic stamp most of the time that had been canceled out, with an actual letter with an individual's note to someone. That's history to me. Although these postcards are not the exact same recovered postcards, they mirror the same postcards. And I like to handle them as if they were actual Titanic relics. So each individual postcard has its own frame, its unique case or display case of sorts, preserving that piece. Whether it's sheet music, I have that preserved behind a plastic shield, and framing. So I think everything, for the most part, if it's an antique, it's behind a display of sorts. When I was younger and I read that book on Titanic from Dr. Robert Ballard, the page in which displayed the two young children that perished on the night, ever since then I have this connection on a personal level. I try my best to research individual stories and get to know the passengers that were a part of that story. And over time, I'm getting to know them as if they were folks that were amongst us today. They have been gone for, I'm sure, almost 100 years now, but I feel as if I'm getting familiar with these individuals just by hearing their stories. So the connection to these people continues through my studies throughout the years of collecting as well. Through Facebook, you get to meet other people that share a common interest, and I've met a variety of different people out there that have been collecting for several months, several years, several decades. And through Facebook, I've met several of you guys out there that are probably watching this video, and quite often share what I've collected, what I've been able to find, and then likewise on their end they share what they find. And through this channel, I hope to present a platform in which we could share that with you, the audience, on a more regular basis.